Penguin Random House Audio presents The Long Reckoning, a story of war, peace, and redemption in Vietnam by George Black, read for you by Elyse Dinh. For Hiền, Hồng, Lai, Linh, Phú, Toàn, and Trung, who grew up under the long shadow of war and have done so much to lighten it. For Ngô Thiện Khiết, in memoriam, and for Yen Ly. The evils of war are great in their endurance and have a long reckoning for ages to come. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to the Young Republicans of Pittsburgh, December 2nd, 1808. Prologue. Her name is Gil. There are thousands like her. She had seen many different kinds of airplanes in the years since the Americans arrived. There were tiny ones with only one man inside that circled almost soundlessly overhead like a hawk searching for some small field creature. There were fast, terrifying ones that swooped down from the sky like birds that had spotted their prey. Some of these had short, stubby wings, and some had wings that were swept back like the point of an arrow. Both kinds threw down a curtain of red fire and black smoke that consumed long lines of banana trees and bamboo thickets and stuck to people's bodies and burned off all their flesh. Sometimes these airplanes fired rockets that made the houses explode and burst into flames. She had also seen many different kinds of bombs. Some came in big containers that opened up before they hit the ground and shot out hundreds of little round bombs in all directions, small enough to fit into your hand. They reminded her of the ball she sometimes saw the Americans tossing around when they were off duty. Some of these little bombs thudded to the ground but did not explode, lying half buried in the dirt. They seemed to be harmless, but Gil's mother warned her not to pick them up. Not every child in the village heeded that warning, and they paid dearly for it. There were also shells that were bigger than her baby brother, and her father told her that these came from the big guns on wheels that the Americans had placed on a hilltop west of the town. They made a whistling, roaring sound as they streaked overhead, and sometimes you could see the puff of smoke that rose when they struck their faraway targets. But the worst bombs of all fell from airplanes that flew so high no one could see them, and these shook the ground for many kilometers around and left rows of large, deep holes in the rice fields that filled with water when the rains came. There was also another kind of airplane that whirred like a dragonfly, and like a dragonfly, it could stop in midair and hover motionless. Mr. Tuấn, who spoke the language of the Americans and helped them when they wanted to talk to local people, told Gil that the soldiers gave these planes a special name, Huey. Once she had seen them firing their weapons at a patch of forest on the outskirts of her village, and then one of the fast planes came and set fire to all the trees. Then the dragonfly planes landed nearby, and all the men inside climbed out and hurried away, ducking their heads in the wind that gusted from the part on top that spun around in circles, flattening the grass. Once Gil was so close to one of the dragonfly planes that she could see the face of a soldier who sat in the open doorway holding a big gun. Somehow, that made these hovering airplanes less frightening. You could look at him and hope he might look back and see that you were not his enemy. It was very different in this way from the silvery shapes in the sky that seemed to fly by themselves without human assistance. Many of the soldiers lived at the base the Americans had built at the edge of the nearby town, on the road that led to the border between Vietnam and Laos. You would see them every day in the market, tossing coins to the women who squatted on the ground with their meager piles of fruit and vegetables for sale. Most of the men were friendly, although the ones from the government army who helped them could be rude and insulting. Some young women had come to live in the town when the Americans arrived, and they often waited at the gates of the camp and went for long walks with them, and did not come back for a long time. Occasionally, a soldier unwrapped a bar of sweet brown chocolate from its silvery paper and gave Gil a square or two that she kept on her tongue until it melted. After the soldiers went out to fight, she often saw them bringing back their dead on trucks or strapped to the back of a tank. Sometimes they were wrapped up in big green bags. About a year later, when Gil was 12, a new kind of airplane came, very different from all the others. It was big and slow and ugly, with a fat engine slung under each wing and a high tail. Usually 3 of them flew so close together that their wings almost touched. They made a harsh, steady drone that grew louder as they approached and put her in mind of a big, lumbering water buffalo. Often, a fast plane came ahead of them and dropped many of the little round bombs. These planes were called Ma, the Phantom, Mr. Tuấn said. And Gil was always frightened when she saw one coming like an angry spirit. The big airplanes came in the still of the early morning from the direction of the East Sea on days when there was no wind. They dipped low over the forest, barely high enough to clear the tallest trees, and a fine white mist streamed out behind them for some distance, then drifted to the ground like gentle summer rain. The first time she saw these planes, they passed a few kilometers to the north of her village, where most of the fighting was, but later she saw them heading to the west, toward the Zaichung Sơn, the high mountains that ran along the border. Once they flew right over the fields next to her village, and people who were working there that morning got wet from the spray that came down on them. It made their eyes sting, and it smelled bad. After that, the vegetables had a bad taste, and all the trees died. The planes took off from the big air base in Da Nang, Mr. Tuấn said. That was where the first American soldiers had come ashore from boats at the start of the war. He said that there had been a big celebration when they arrived. Schoolgirls had waited on the beach to greet them with garlands of flowers. Gil had never been to the city herself. It was too far away. Mr. Tuấn told her that even though the planes flew slowly, they could get here in less than an hour, which she found impossible to believe. One day, government soldiers came with guns and told everyone they had to walk into the town, which was 4 kilometers away. This was where they would live now, in small huts that they had to make from things that the Americans at the base had thrown away. They were surrounded by a fence made of curls of wire with sharp spikes. From the time the sun went down until it came up again the next morning, people were ordered not to leave their huts. A few days after they arrived, the soldiers burned Gil's village to the ground. Despite the many hardships, Gil made new friends in the town. Her parents got to know a family from a nearby village whose eldest son, Thảo, was 16 years old. Her parents often said how much they liked the boy, how respectful he was, how devout his family were in worshiping their ancestors. At least once a week, Thảo and his parents visited their graves, which were in one of the rice fields by the river that were still undisturbed. Gil caught Thảo glancing at her out of the corner of his eye. She had the impression that he liked her very much. But then suddenly one morning he was gone. Gil heard rumors that the Americans had come looking for him, and he had run away to the mountains with some of the other young men. By the time peace came to her village, Gil was a grown woman.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?